The distress call. The nebula streak cut through the inky void of space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight. At the helm, Captain Zach Hawkins leaned back in his pilot's chair, boots propped up on the console. His weathered face bore the scars of countless close calls, each one a badge of honor in the dangerous world of interstellar smuggling. Another successful run, Zach muttered to himself, allowing a rare smile to crease his features. The cargo hold was filled with exotic spices from the Andromeda colonies, guaranteed to fetch a premium on the black markets of Earth's outer settlements. It wasn't strictly legal, but then again, neither was much of what Zach did for a living. As the nebula streak cruised on autopilot, Zach's mind wandered to the events that had led him to this life. The war, the betrayal, the loss. He pushed the memories aside. The past was the past, and out here in the fringes of explored space, only the present mattered. A sudden alarm jolted Zach from his reverie. He sat up straight, eyes scanning the readouts. "What the hell?" he muttered, fingers dancing across the controls. The ship's long-range sensors had picked up something unusual. A distress beacon, faint but unmistakable, originating from the heart of the treacherous Maelstrom Nebula. Zach hesitated. The smart move would be to ignore it. The Maelstrom was notorious for its unpredictable energy storms and spatial anomalies. Many ships had ventured in, never to be seen again, but something about the signal tugged at him. Its pattern was unlike anything he'd encountered before, definitely not human in origin. "Computer, analyze the distress beacon. Any matches in our database?" Zach asked, curiosity getting the better of him. The ship's AI responded in its crisp, emotionless voice. "Negative, Captain. Signal pattern does not match any known configurations. Origin, unknown." Zach drummed his fingers on the armrest, weighing his options. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to stay clear, to make the delivery and collect his payment. But another part, a part he thought he buried long ago, whispered of duty and the possibility of lives at stake. With a resigned sigh, Zach made his decision. "Computer, plot a course for the source of that distress beacon, and while you're at it, run a full diagnostic on our shields and propulsion systems. I have a feeling we're going to need them." As the nebula streak altered course, plunging towards the swirling chaos of the Maelstrom, Zach couldn't shake the feeling that he was flying into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. The unknown signal, the dangerous territory, it all reeked of the kind of trouble he'd sworn to avoid. But as the first tendrils of the nebula's energy storms lashed against the ship's hull, Zach felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This was what he lived for, after all. The thrill of the unknown, the challenge of beating impossible odds. Whatever awaited him in the heart of the Maelstrom, he'd face it head-on. Little did Zach know that his impulsive decision was about to catapult him into the center of a galactic conflict that would test not only his skills as a pilot, but the very limits of human ingenuity and courage. The nebula streak pushed deeper into the Maelstrom, its enhanced shields straining against the onslaught of cosmic energy. Zach's hands flew across the controls, making split-second adjustments to keep the ship stable. Brilliant flashes of light illuminated the cockpit as lightning-like discharges crackled around them. "Come on, baby," Zach murmured to his ship, "just a little further." As they penetrated the densest part of the nebula, the distress signal grew stronger. Zach's sensors struggled to make sense of the surrounding space, the Maelstrom's unique properties playing havoc with his instruments. But years of experience had honed his instincts, and he relied on them now more than ever. Suddenly, the swirling gases parted, revealing a sight that made Zach's breath catch in his throat. A massive ship, easily 10 times the size of the nebula streak, hung motionless in space. Its design was like nothing Zach had ever seen. Organic curves blended seamlessly with crystalline structures, the entire vessel pulsing with a faint otherworldly light. "Well, I'll be damned," Zach whispered, awe momentarily overriding his usual cynicism. "Computer, any life signs?" "Affirmative, Captain," the AI responded. One life sign detected, faint and fluctuating. Zach's jaw set with determination. One life. Someone was still alive over there, holding on by a thread. He maneuvered the nebula streak closer, searching for a way in. As he approached, he noticed severe damage to one section of the alien vessel, a gaping wound in its hull, edges crystallized by exposure to the nebula's energy. With practiced precision, Zach guided his ship into the breach, setting down in what appeared to be a cavernous hangar bay. As the nebula streak's engines powered down, an eerie silence fell over the ship. Zach double-checked the atmosphere readings. Breathable, but barely. Whatever had happened here had compromised the alien vessel's life support systems. Donning his exosuit, Zach grabbed a medkit and a portable scanner. The airlock hissed open, and he stepped out into the alien ship. The interior was as bizarre as the exterior. Corridors that seemed to shift and breathe, surfaces that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. Zach had smuggled his fair share of exotic goods, but this was beyond anything in his experience. Following the scanner's guidance, Zach made his way deeper into the ship. The life sign was growing weaker by the minute. He quickened his pace, acutely aware that every second could mean the difference between life and death for whoever, or whatever, was still alive in this ghostly vessel. As he rounded a corner, Zach froze. There, suspended in a field of shimmering energy, was a being unlike any he'd encountered in his travels across the galaxy. Humanoid in general shape, but with skin that seemed to ripple with colors like the surface of a soap bubble. Long, delicate limbs hung limp, and a crest of crystalline structures adorned its head. The alien's eyes snapped open, locking onto Zach with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Those eyes, swirling pools of silver that seemed to hold the depths of space within them. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with agonizing slowness, the alien raised a hand towards Zach, its skin flickering weakly. Zach hesitated for only a heartbeat before rushing forward. "Easy there," he said, his gruff voice softened by concern. "I'm here to help. Can you understand me?" To his shock, a voice responded directly in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. Human, it said, a mixture of surprise and relief coloring the telepathic communication. "You came." As Zach worked to stabilize the alien's condition, his mind raced with questions. Who was this being? What had happened to this magnificent ship? And most pressingly, what kind of trouble had he just gotten himself into by answering this distress call? Little did Zach know, but his impulsive act of compassion was about to thrust him into the center of a conflict that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy, with humanity's fate hanging in the balance. As Zach carefully disconnected the alien from the failing stasis field, he felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. Whatever had brought this extraordinary being to the brink of death in the heart of the Maelstrom Nebula, it was clear that the stakes were far higher than a simple rescue mission. With the alien cradled in his arms, surprisingly light despite its size, Zach began the journey back to the nebula streak. Each step was measured, every sense on high alert for any sign of danger lurking in the depths of the dying ship. As they neared his vessel, a violent tremor shook the alien craft. Zach stumbled, struggling to keep his balance while protecting his fragile cargo. The alien's eyes fluttered open once more, locking onto Zach's with urgent intensity. "We must leave," the telepathic voice echoed in his mind, tinged with fear. "They come." "Who's coming?" Zach demanded, but the alien had already slipped back into unconsciousness. Another tremor, stronger this time, sent debris raining down around them. Zach broke into a run, his exosuit's servos whining with the effort. He barely made it to the nebula streak's airlock before a deafening roar filled the hangar bay. Risking a glance over his shoulder, Zach's blood ran cold. A massive ship, bristling with weapons, had materialized at the edge of the maelstrom. Its design was angular, aggressive, the complete opposite of the organic grace of the vessel they were leaving behind. Zach didn't need to see any insignia to know that whoever was on that ship, they weren't here to help. Computer, emergency takeoff sequence. Zack barked as he sealed the airlock behind him. He gently laid the alien on a makeshift bed in the medbay before sprinting to the cockpit. The Nebula Streak's engines roared to life, just as the first volley of energy weapons slammed into the dying alien ship. Zack's hands flew across the controls, guiding his ship out of the disintegrating hangar and into the swirling chaos of the maelstrom. Behind them, the beautiful alien vessel shuddered and broke apart, consumed by weapons fire and the nebula's destructive energy. "Hang on," Zack muttered, unsure if he was talking to his unconscious passenger or to himself. The Nebula Streak dove and weaved through the storm, sensors screaming warnings as the pursuing ship unleashed a barrage of fire. Zack's mind raced, plotting a course through the most dangerous parts of the nebula, areas that would tear a larger ship apart. It was a gamble, but Zack had built his reputation on beating impossible odds. The Nebula Streak shuddered and groaned as he pushed it to its limits, threading through gaps in the energy storms that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Behind them, their pursuer struggled to keep pace, its larger size working against it in the treacherous environment. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Zack guided the Nebula Streak out of the maelstrom's edge. His sensors showed clear space ahead, and no sign of pursuit. He allowed himself a moment of relief before setting a course for the nearest safe port. Only then did he engage the autopilot and make his way back to the medbay. The alien lay motionless on the bed, its shimmering skin now pale and dull. Zack ran a medical scan, frowning at the results. The readings were unlike anything in his database, but one thing was clear: his passenger was in critical condition. As he worked to stabilize the alien's life signs, Zack's mind whirled with questions. Who was this being? What made them so valuable that someone would destroy an entire ship to get to them? And most pressingly, what the hell had he gotten himself into? The alien's eyes fluttered open once more, focusing on Zack with effort. The telepathic voice in his mind was weak but clear. "Thank you, human. You have saved more than just my life today." "Yeah, well, let's make sure you stay alive before we start handing out medals," Zack replied gruffly, hiding his concern behind humor. "Think you can tell me what's going on? Who were those guys back there? And why were they so keen on blasting you out of existence?" The alien's skin rippled with what Zack interpreted as a mix of pain and urgency. "I am Lyra, last of the luminary. What I carry, it could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The Kree Empire will stop at nothing to possess it." Zack's blood ran cold. The Kree Empire. He'd heard whispers, rumors of a ruthless expansionist force on the edges of known space. If they were involved, this situation was far more dangerous than he'd imagined. "And what exactly is this thing you're carrying?" Zack asked, though he had a sinking feeling he might regret learning the answer. Lyra's silver eyes seemed to peer into Zack's very soul. "Hope," she said simply. "Hope for countless worlds under Kree oppression. Hope for a future where the galaxy knows peace." As the weight of those words settled over him, Zack realized that his life as a simple smuggler was over. He had unwittingly stumbled into a conflict that would shape the fate of entire civilizations. And somehow, improbably, humanity now found itself at the center of it all. With a wry smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, Zack patted Lyra's hand. "Well, sweetheart, looks like we're in for one hell of a ride. Let's see if we can't save the galaxy together, shall we?" As the Nebula Streak streaked through space, carrying its unlikely pair of allies, the first moves in a cosmic chess game were set in motion. The fate of worlds hung in the balance, and at the center of it all, a grizzled human smuggler and an alien with the key to toppling an empire. The daring rescue. The Nebula Streak hurtled through space, its engines pushed to the limit. In the cockpit, Zack Hawkins' eyes darted between the navigation console and the rear sensors, searching for any sign of pursuit. So far, they seemed to have given the Kree the slip, but he knew better than to let his guard down. In the medbay, Lyra's condition had stabilized, but she remained unconscious. Zack had done what he could with his limited medical knowledge and the ship's basic equipment, but he knew she needed more specialized care. The problem was finding somewhere safe to dock without painting a target on their backs. As if reading his thoughts, the ship's eye chimed in. "Captain, we are approaching the Omega Nebula. Sensors detect a settlement on the third planet of the Saurabaric system." Zack grimaced. Omega, a lawless hive of mercenaries, criminals, and outcasts. Not his first choice for a pit stop, but beggars couldn't be choosers. "Set a course," he ordered, "and run a full scan of the system. I want to know about any ship movements." As they approached Omega, Zack's mind raced, formulating a plan. He needed information, supplies, and possibly backup. And in a place like Omega, everything had a price. The nebula streak slipped into Omega's docking bay, blending in with the eclectic mix of ships from across the galaxy. Zack secured the ship, ensuring Lyra was hidden and protected before venturing out into the station's grimy corridors. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices, engine grease, and desperation. Zack made his way to a dingy bar called the Broken Airlock, a known hangout for information brokers and mercenaries. As he entered, several pairs of eyes, some human, many not, turned to assess the newcomer. Zack approached the bar, ordering a drink with a subtle hand signal that marked him as someone in the trade. The bartender, a grizzled Batarian with cybernetic implants, nodded in understanding. "What's the word?" Zack asked casually, sliding a credit chit across the bar. The Batarian's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Cree activity's been up lately. Word is they're looking for something big. Or someone." He gave Zack a pointed look. Zack kept his face neutral. "Any specifics on what they're after?" The bartender leaned in closer. "There's talk of a fugitive, someone with information that could bring down the Empire. Bounties high enough to buy your own planet." Zack's stomach tightened, but he maintained his poker face. "Interesting. Any other players in the game?" "The usual suspects. Pirates looking to cash in, mercs hoping for a big score. But there's something else." The Batarian's voice dropped to a whisper. Whispers of an old power stirring. Something that's got even the Kree spooked. Before Zack could press for more details, a commotion erupted at the other end of the bar. A towering Krogan was squaring off against a Lith Aseri commando, their argument quickly escalating to drawn weapons. In the chaos that followed, Zack slipped out of the bar, his mind whirling with new information and fresh concerns. He needed to get back to the ship, to Lyra. But as he rounded a corner, he found his path blocked by 3 figures in nondescript armor, their faces hidden behind opaque visors. "Captain Hawkins," the leader spoke, voice distorted by a modulator. "We'd like a word." Zack's hand inched towards his concealed blaster. "Sorry, fellas. My dance card's full." The leader raised a placating hand. "We're not here to fight. We represent interested parties. Parties who believe your new friend might be the key to changing the balance of power in this sector." Zack's eyes narrowed. "And who might these interested parties be?" "Let's just say we're no friends of the Kree Empire. We can offer protection, resources. All we ask is a chance to speak with your passenger." For a moment, Zack considered the offer. But something in his gut told him this was a bad idea. These people, whoever they were, saw Lyra as a means to an end. And Zack had seen enough of the galaxy to know that those kinds of alliances rarely ended well for the people caught in the middle. "Thanks, but no thanks," Zack replied, tensing for action. "I think we'll take our chances on our own." The leader sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that. Take him." What followed was a blur of motion. Zack's combat instincts, honed by years of close scrapes, kicked into overdrive. He ducked under the first attacker's grab, using the alien's momentum to send them crashing into a stack of crates. His blaster cleared its holster in a smooth motion, catching the second assailant with a stun bolt to the chest. The leader proved more of a challenge, moving with the fluid grace of a trained assassin. They exchanged blows in a deadly dance, each searching for an opening. Zack felt a rib crack under a particularly vicious strike, but he pushed through the pain, years of bar fights and back alley brawls serving him well. Finally, Zack saw his chance. As the leader committed to a powerful blow, he dropped low, sweeping their legs out from under them. In one smooth motion, he brought the butt of his blaster down on the back of their head, ending the fight. Panting and clutching his side, Zack surveyed the unconscious forms of his would-be captors. He knew he had to move fast. It wouldn't be long before someone came to investigate the commotion. Racing back to the nebula streak, Zack's mind was made up. Omega was compromised. They needed to leave, and fast. As he approached his ship, he saw a figure slumped by the airlock. His heart leaped into his throat until he recognized the shimmering skin. Lyra. He called out, rushing to her side. "What the hell are you doing out here?" The alien's silver eyes met his, filled with a mix of pain and determination. "Danger," she gasped. "I sensed. We must leave. Now." Zack didn't need to be told twice. He helped Lyra into the ship, sealing the airlock behind them. As he fired up the engines, alarms blared across Omega's docking bay. Through the view screen, Zack could see armed figures converging on their position. "Hang on to something," he muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. The Nebula Streak's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the docking bay like a cork from a bottle. Energy weapons fire streaked past them, but Zack's evasive maneuvers kept them one step ahead. As they cleared Omega's atmosphere, Zack allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The ship's sensors lit up with multiple contacts, a Kree battle group emerging from FTL on an intercept course. Zack's hands flew across the controls, plotting a desperate course. "I hope you're ready for more excitement," he called back to Lyra, "because I think we just jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire." As the nebula streak plunged into the swirling energies of a nearby nebula, Zack couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of their troubles. Whatever secrets Lyra held, whatever power she represented, it was clear that forces beyond his imagination were converging to claim it. And somehow, against all odds, a washed-up smuggler from Earth had become the linchpin in a conflict that could reshape the galaxy. Zack allowed himself a grim smile. If they were going to have any chance of surviving this, he'd need to draw on every trick, every connection, and every ounce of human ingenuity he possessed. As the pursuing ships faded from sensors, swallowed by the nebula's chaotic energies, Zack set a course for the fringes of known space. There, in the lawless frontier where even the Kree feared to tread, he hoped to find answers, and perhaps allies in their desperate fight against an empire. The real journey, Zack realized, was just beginning. Unlikely allies. The nebula streak drifted silently through the vast emptiness of uncharted space. In the cockpit, Zack Hawkins sat slumped in the pilot's chair, fatigue etched across his features. They had been running for days, always one step ahead of their pursuers, but never far enough to truly rest. Lyra entered the cockpit, her movements still slightly unsteady but improving. Her shimmering skin pulsed with concern as she regarded her human savior. "You need rest, Zack," she said, her telepathic voice gentle in his mind. Zack straightened, offering a weary smile. "I'll sleep when we're safe, which at this rate might be never." He gestured to the star chart displayed on the main screen. "Any of this look familiar to you? We're way off any maps I've got." Lyra studied the display, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "This region. It was once part of the luminary sphere of influence, long ago. There may be hope yet." She pointed to a nondescript area of space. "Here, there is an outpost, hidden from most sensors. We called it Haven." Zack raised an eyebrow. "Hidden outpost, huh? Sounds like my kind of place. Any chance your people left behind some fancy tech that might give us an edge?" Lyra's skin rippled with what Zack had come to recognize as amusement. Perhaps. The Luminary were known for their technological prowess. "But Zack, there is something you must understand about what I carry." Zach leaned forward, all traces of fatigue vanishing. I'm all ears, sweetheart. Lyra's expression turned solemn. What the Kree seek is not a weapon or a piece of technology. It is knowledge. The collective wisdom and scientific understanding of the Luminary, passed down through generations. I am the last carrier of this knowledge, encoded into my very being. Zach whistled low. No wonder they're willing to tear apart the galaxy to get to you. But why you? Why not store it in some supercomputer or something? The knowledge adapts, grows. It requires a living mind to interpret and apply it. In the wrong hands, it could lead to unimaginable destruction. But used wisely, it could usher in an era of peace and prosperity for all species. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Zach's shoulders. He was no longer just protecting a fugitive. He was safeguarding the future of the galaxy itself. Well, he said with forced lightness, no pressure or anything. As Zach set a course for the coordinates Lyra provided, the ship's sensors suddenly blared a warning. A massive energy signature had appeared out of nowhere, directly in their path. Ah, hell, Zach muttered, hands flying over the controls. Please tell me that's the welcoming committee for your hidden outpost. Before Lyra could respond, a ship materialized before them. It was unlike anything Zach had ever seen. A sleek, almost organic design that seemed to bend the very light around it. It dwarfed the nebula streak, making Zach feel like a minnow before a whale. A beam of energy engulfed their ship, but instead of weapons fire, Zach realized it was a tractor beam, drawing them inexorably towards the massive vessel. Lyra, any idea who our new friends might be? Zach asked, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. Lyra's eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Impossible, she whispered. They were thought to be extinct. A myth. Who? Zach demanded. The architects. Lyra breathed. The oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. They were the mentors of the Luminary, eons ago. As the nebula streak was drawn into a cavernous hangar bay, Zach felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. If these architects were as advanced as Lyra suggested, they might be the edge they needed against the Kree. But ancient, powerful aliens were just as likely to squash them like insects as they were to help. The ship settled gently onto the hangar floor, and for a moment, all was silent. Then, with a hiss of equalizing pressure, the nebula streak's airlock opened of its own accord. Zach shot a glance at Lyra. Any advice on dealing with hyper-advanced alien races? Lyra's skin pulsed with nervous energy. Be respectful, but do not show fear. The architects value courage and intellect above all else. Taking a deep breath, Zach stepped out of his ship and into the hangar. The air shimmed with an energy he couldn't quite define, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Before them stood three figures, tall and willowy, with skin that seemed to be composed of shifting geometric patterns. Their eyes, if you could call them that, were swirling vortexes of light. The central figure spoke, its voice resonating not through the air, but directly in Zach and Lyra's minds. Welcome, last of the Luminary and human of Earth. We have watched your flight with great interest. Zach, never one to be intimidated, stepped forward. Thanks for the save. But I've got to ask, where the hell have you folks been while the Kree have been tearing up the galaxy? He felt Lyra's shock at his bluntness, but the architect seemed unperturbed. In fact, Zach could have sworn he detected a hint of amusement in its response. Direct, like many of your kind. Good. We have remained hidden, observing. The time was not right for our intervention. But now, with the convergence of a luminary knowledge carrier and a representative of humanity's potential, the cosmic scales have shifted. Lyra stepped forward, bowing deeply. Great ones, we seek your aid. The Kree Empire threatens not just us, but countless worlds. The architect nodded solemnly. We are aware. The Kree's ambitions have grown beyond acceptable bounds. But we cannot simply solve this problem for you. The younger races must prove themselves ready for the responsibilities that come with greater knowledge and power. Zack crossed his arms, a plan forming in his mind. All right then, how about this? You give us the tools and the know-how, and we'll take care of the Kree ourselves. Humanity's pretty good at punching above our weight class. The architects were silent for a moment, seemingly communicating among themselves. Finally, the leader spoke again. Your proposal has merit, human. We will provide you with certain advantages, but the true test lies ahead. The fate of the galaxy will rest on your actions. As the architects led them deeper into their vast ship, Zack couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were about to be given weapons and knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. But with that power came a responsibility he wasn't sure he was ready for. Glancing at Lyra, seeing the hope shining in her silver eyes, Zack steeled himself. Ready or not, the galaxy needed them, and he'd be damned if he let it down. All right, teach, Zack said with a grin. Let's see what you've got. The Galactic Conspiracy. The next few days aboard the Architect's vessel were a whirlwind of activity. Zack found himself immersed in a crash course on advanced technology that made even the most cutting-edge human innovations seem primitive by comparison. Lyra, meanwhile, worked with the architects to unlock deeper layers of the luminary knowledge within her. As Zack sat in a chamber that seemed to be made of living crystal, absorbing information directly into his mind through some incomprehensible process, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come from his days as a simple smuggler. The universe had suddenly become so much larger, so much more complex than he'd ever imagined. During a rare break, Zack found Lyra on an observation deck, her shimmering form silhouetted against the backdrop of swirling galaxies. "How are you holding up?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes filled with a mix of wonder and sadness. "The knowledge within me. It's so vast. Zack, I'm beginning to understand why the Kree want it so badly. With this, they could reshape the very fabric of reality." Zack let out a low whistle. No pressure or anything, right? Just the fate of all existence in our hands. Lyra's skin rippled with what Zack had come to recognize as her version of a smile. "Your species' ability to find humor in dire situations continues to amaze me." Before Zack could respond, one of the architects glided into the room, its form seeming to bend the light around it. "We have made a disturbing discovery," it announced without preamble. "The Kree's pursuit of the luminary knowledge is merely a part of a larger conspiracy, one that threatens the very balance of the cosmos." The architect waved a hand, and a holographic display sprang to life before them. It showed a complex web of connections between various galactic powers, with the Kree Empire at the center. "For millennia, we believed the Kree's expansionist tendencies were simply the natural evolution of an ambitious species," the architect explained. "But we have uncovered evidence of an ancient force manipulating events from the shadows, a force that predates even our own civilization." Zack leaned in, studying the hologram. "What kind of force are we talking about here?" "Some kind of super-advanced a race of beings from another dimension." The architect's form shimmered with what might have been uncertainty. "We are unsure. Our records speak of a time before time, when entities of unimaginable power shaped the early universe. We had thought them long gone, but it seems at least one has remained, guiding the development of younger races towards some unknown goal." Lyra gasped, her luminescent skin pulsing rapidly. "The adversary," she whispered. "There were legends among my people, stories of a malevolent force that sought to unmake creation itself. We dismissed them as myths, but myths often have a grain of truth," Zack finished, feeling a chill run down his spine. "So we're not just up against the Kree. We're fighting some kind of cosmic horror that's been pulling the strings for billions of years." "Great. Any other good news?" The architect's form pulsed with an emotion Zack couldn't quite interpret. "There is more. We believe this entity has agents throughout the galaxy, beings it has corrupted or coerced to serve its will. Some may be in positions of great power within various civilizations, including Earth. Zack felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Earth. You're saying my home planet might be compromised. It is a possibility we cannot ignore, the architect confirmed. The sudden leap in human technological development over the past century. It may not have been entirely of your own doing. Lyra placed a comforting hand on Zack's arm, her touch sending a warm tingle through his body. This changes nothing about who you are, Zack. If anything, it makes your achievements all the more impressive. Your people have retained their spirit, their creativity, despite this unseen influence. Zack nodded, grateful for her support. He turned back to the architect, his jaw set with determination. All right, so what's our next move? How do we fight an enemy we can barely comprehend? The architect's form shimmered, and for a moment, Zack could have sworn he saw approval in its swirling eyes. We have prepared a ship for you, one that combines the best of architect, luminary, and human technology. With it, you must gather allies from across the galaxy. Only a united front of all sentient species will have a chance against this threat. And the Kree? Zack asked. They're still gunning for us, and they've got a head start. We will provide you with a means to evade their pursuit, the architect assured him. But be warned, the closer you come to unraveling this conspiracy, the more desperate your enemies will become. Trust will be your most valuable resource, and also the most fragile. As Zack and Lyra prepared to embark on their new mission, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on their shoulders. They were no longer simply fugitives on the run. They had become the galaxy's best hope for survival against a threat beyond imagination. Boarding their new ship, a sleek vessel that hummed with power beyond anything Zack had ever experienced, he turned to Lyra with a wry smile. You know, when I answered your distress call, I was just hoping for a decent payday. Saving the universe wasn't exactly part of the plan. Lyra's skin shimmered with affection and determination. Plans change, Zack Hawkins, but I cannot think of anyone I would rather have by my side for this journey. As the ship's engines fired up, preparing to launch them into the unknown, Zack felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. The odds were stacked against them, the enemy vast and unknowable. But humanity had always thrived on beating the impossible. All right, universe, Zack muttered as he took the controls. Let's see what you've got. With a flash of energy, their ship vanished into the depths of space, carrying with it the hopes of countless worlds. The fight for the future of the galaxy had begun. Humanity's stand. The sleek architect-enhanced ship, which Zack had affectionately dubbed the Cosmic Streak, dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edges of a sprawling nebula. The swirling gases painted the viewscreen in hues of purple and blue, masking the true nature of what lay hidden within. You sure about this, Lyra? Zack asked, his fingers hovering over the controls. Last chance to back out before we dive into the hornet's nest. Lyra stood beside him, her luminescent skin pulsing with determination. We have no choice, Zack. The coalition we've built over the past months is strong, but without the support of the Galactic Council, we cannot hope to unite enough forces to challenge both the Kree and the adversary. Zack nodded grimly. Their journey across the stars had been a whirlwind of diplomacy, daring escapes, and more than a few shootouts. They'd convinced isolationist species to join their cause, brokered peace between ancient enemies, and exposed adversary agents in a dozen governments. But this was their riskiest gambit yet. All right then, Zack said, punching in the final approach vector. Let's go crash a party. The cosmic streak sliced through the nebula's gases, its advanced sensors piercing the natural camouflage, to reveal a massive space station unlike anything Zack had ever seen. It was a sprawling construct of interconnected rings and spires, each section representing one of the major galactic powers. As they approached, a squadron of sleek fighter craft rose to intercept them. Zack tensed, ready for evasive action, but Lyra placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Patience, she counseled. Remember, we're expected. Sure enough, after a tense moment, A voice crackled over the comm. Unidentified vessel, you are cleared for docking in Bay 17. Be advised, any hostile action will be met with lethal force. Zack guided the ship into the designated bay with practiced ease. As the docking clamps engaged, he turned to Lyra with a wry smile. Well, we made it this far without being blown to atoms. I'd call that a win. Lyra's skin shimmered with what Zack had come to recognize as nervous amusement. The real challenge lies ahead, Zack. Are you ready? Zack stood, straightening his jacket, a curious mix of his old smuggler's attire and more formal diplomatic wear. Ready as I'll ever be to tell a bunch of stuck-up politicians that the universe is about to end. Let's do this. They disembarked to find a delegation waiting for them. Representatives from various council races, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, outright hostility. At their head stood a tall, regal-looking alien with iridescent scales and multifaceted eyes. I am Sarleth, Chief Arbiter of the Galactic Council, the alien announced. Your presence here is unprecedented. I hope, for all our sakes, that this information you claim to possess is as vital as you say. Zack stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height. Trust me, your high and mightiness. You're gonna want to hear this. But not here. We need to address the full council. Time's a luxury we don't have. Sarleth's eyes narrowed, but after a moment's consideration, he nodded. Very well. Follow me. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater, with delegates from hundreds of species arranged in concentric rings. The air was thick with tension as Zack and Lyra were led to the central platform. Whispers and murmurs filled the room. Many had heard rumors of the human and luminary who had been stirring up trouble across the galaxy. As Zack began to speak, laying out the evidence they had gathered of the adversary's influence and the true extent of the Kree threat, he could see the disbelief and shock rippling through the assembly. He pressed on, his natural charisma and the gravity of the situation lending weight to his words. Lyra stepped forward, her ethereal presence capturing the council's attention. She interfaced with the chamber's holographic systems, projecting the sum of their discoveries. The web of conspiracy, the ancient warnings, the impending doom that threatened not just individual worlds, but the very fabric of the universe. As their presentation concluded, the chamber erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, old grudges resurfaced, and more than a few delegates called for Zack and Lyra's immediate arrest. Sarleth raised his hands, calling for order. These are grave accusations, he said, his voice cutting through the tumult. If true, they represent the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced. But the question remains, how can we trust the word of a human smuggler and the last of a dead race? Before Zack could retort, alarms blared throughout the station. A harried aide rushed to Sarleth's side, whispering urgently in his ear. The Arbiter's scales paled visibly. It seems, Sarleth announced, his voice tight, that circumstances have forced our hand. A Kree battle fleet has just entered the system, led by a vessel of impossible proportions. Zack and Lyra exchanged grim looks. The adversary, Lyra whispered, it's making its move. Zack turned to address the council once more, his voice ringing with conviction. You wanted proof. Well, here it is, knocking on your front door. We can stand here arguing while the galaxy burns, or we can fight. Together. A hush fell over the chamber as the weight of the moment settled on every being present. Then, slowly at first, but with gathering momentum, voices began to rise in agreement. Species that had been bitter enemies for generations now pledged to stand side by side against the coming darkness. Sarleth nodded solemnly to Zack and Lyra. It seems the galaxy owes you a debt, unlikely heroes. What would you have us do? Zack's mind raced, years of outrunning authorities and improvising plans serving him well. We need every ship you've got. Battlecruisers, fighters, anything that can fly and shoot. And we need to get word to our allies. It's time to spring the trap. As the council chamber transformed into an impromptu war room, Zack felt Lyra's hand slip into his. He turned to find her silver eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. "Whatever happens next," she said, her mental voice steady, "know that you have brought unity to the galaxy in its darkest hour. You've proven that humanity's greatest strength is not its technology or its weapons, but its indomitable spirit." Zack squeezed her hand, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability. "We're not out of this yet, sweetheart. But if this is humanity's last stand, we're going to make it one for the history books." As they rushed the cosmic streak, preparing to lead the hastily assembled fleet into battle, Zack couldn't help but marvel at the twist of fate that had brought him here. From a simple smuggler to the linchpin of the galaxy's survival, it was almost too much to believe. But as the first shots of the battle began to light up space around them, Zack pushed aside his doubts. He was Zack Hawkins, reluctant hero, and he had a universe to save. The final battle for the fate of all creation had begun.